The single best thing that happened to me that I was born before the digital age. We had no cell phones and the computers were there only in the schools and colleges. I spent all my 4 years of graduation using a small Samsung mobile phone. So the world had fewer distractions and I had enough time to think, to walk, to read, to write and stay connected with the outside world rather than getting involved in the virtual world. It was during the same college years when I developed a good reading habit, and all it began with the books of Khushwant Singh. His writing style, or you can say his way of communicating with the readers, was so much authentic that it told me what it takes to stay original as a writer. His writing style taught me how to be courageous. His novels taught me what it takes to stay authentic before the readers. Yes, he was a sort of womanizer and enjoyed the company of women throughout his life. So there is a book titled Love and Sex by Khushwant Singh. It is kind of compilation of all the columns and articles that Khushwant Singh has ever wrote. And I read this book almost 12 to 15 times. I read this book so closely that I built same kind of vocabulary, same kind of sentence formation, same kind of tone of voice that Khushwant Singh used to write. I was so much influenced by his writing style that I too started writing erotica. At that time I was in college and I used to write a lot of erotica short stories that I became so popular in the university. And this way I enjoyed a lot of parties and I have a great circle of friends. I have a great circle of people who know me. And my readers were always curious about what I am going to write next. So that's how I became a writer who is much more interested in eroticas. I think it is normal to have such thoughts when you are in your adolescence or when you are teenage. In fact, no one can run from such kind of thoughts, just because it is quite normal to have such thoughts, to have the thoughts of love, to have the thoughts of sex, to have the thoughts of hatred and jealousy. It is a sort of collective unconsciousness what Carl Jung has talked about in his works. Finding the unconscious is the greatest discovery of a mankind. There are deep within a lot of layers of unconscious which determine our day-to-day life. Almost 90% of the activities is determined through this unconsciousness. So it was not like Sigmund Freud or Carl Jung were the very first people who talked about unconsciousness. Long before that, Indians already believed in such kind of philosophies. In fact, a lot of people read the philosophies of Indian culture and became enlightened. One of them was Lord Buddha, and he discovered that unconscious long time ago. But it was later by Sigmund Freud or Carl Jung which started writing the theories. In fact, Carl Jung has written a lot about Kundalini Yoga. So it was like these thoughts, the love, hatred and other thoughts that no one teaches us, that came from within us, that is a part of collective unconsciousness. You can relate like this. So it was very natural for me to get attracted by those thoughts and to write about those thoughts in my own writing style. Yes, it took me a lot of time to overcome the influence of Khushwant Singh and to find my own voice as an artist. It happens to every artist. It is not like an artist is born talented. You can place here the concept of Plato, that is mimesis. It's simply like you love doing something and you start imitating other artists for years until you find your own style of presenting your art. So for instance, if you want to be a musician, you start imitating already established musicians. So in the company of a poet, a book written on Gulzar, in the preface of that book, Gulzar has written that why it is important for a writer to find his own voice. An artist finds his interest in some particular activity, and through imitation, through mimesis, he develops all kinds of skills, techniques, and then use those skills and techniques in his own writing in order to discover himself. He overcomes that anxiety of influence from his predecessors and figure out what he wants to write. You too can simply pick the writer you are most interested in, and then you just start imitating the vocabulary, the statements, the sentence formation, the punctuation, the tone of voice, and by you will develop all the skills for you to become a writer. So the writing of Khushwant Singh played a significant role in developing my art, in developing my writing style, in developing the content which I am delivering it to you now. One way or another, I developed my reading habit or writing skills just by reading the short stories of Khushwant Singh and then other such writers who influenced me at a later stage. So it were not the academic books, but the inner calling, the interest of a person, the interest of a student, which lead him to read a lot of works. So studying English literature is not a subject, it is an art. It is like you yourself get involved in studying a language and you develop a certain kind of bond with the language. You start playing with the words, sentences, punctuation, tone of voice, so on and so forth. And now I want to say thanks to the writings of R.K. Narayan. I remember I found the autobiography titled My Days, which was written by R.K. Narayan, and it was something which I found in a cafe when I was studying, when I was preparing for Indian Engineering Services in New Delhi. So it was back in 2018. I was reading this autobiography in a cafe and I found it very engaging. So without informing the owner of the cafe, I put that book in my bag and brought it to my room. Anyway, that book, the autobiography of R.K. Narayan, was eating dust at that cafe and no one was interested in reading books at that time. So I just did the justice with the book by bringing it to my room. Now there I read that R.K. Narayan confessed about his love for writing erotica when he started writing, when he started his career as a writer. And then he thought about his mother. What would she think when she comes to know about his son writing erotica? And that's why he gave up the thought of writing erotica and decided to write plain stories that promote simplicity of life. That particular passage was an epiphany for me, and I too gave up writing short stories. I gave up reading Khushwant Singh and moved towards becoming a writer, or you can say a content creator trying to encourage simplicity and love for books. It was not like the writings of Khushwant Singh influenced me to become an erotica writer, but his writings were among one of those writings which influenced me to tread down the road of spiritual growth. And then he recommended a book, The Shadow Lines by Amitav Ghosh, in one of his columns. And from Khushwant Singh, I moved to Amitav Ghosh and I did read that Shadow Lines. I was mesmerized by the writing style of Amitav Ghosh. The very use of language, the long sentences, the sentence formation, the narration, the voice of Amitav Ghosh, the voices of the characters that was a part of Shadow Lines introduced me to a whole new world of English literature. And from the readings of Khushwant Singh, Amitav Ghosh, I started falling in love with the language. I started falling in love with the words, sentences, with English. And that's how I quit my career as a civil engineer and moved into the field of English literature. So I hope you found the video worth your time. That's it for this video. Thank you.